been waiting for has now finally arrived.
From knockouts to tap-outs.
It's all over!
Inside the octagon and beyond.
Is this not real now? Are we pretending?
We're rich, baby. Break out the red panties.
This is the MMA Report with John Pollock.
Unbelievable! Here we go!
Welcome to the MMA Report. It's John Pollock with you for another week. Coming up on today's show, we're going to be joined by three big guests. We are going to be joined by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Cub Swanson, who is headlining this Saturday's Fight Night card against Artem Lobov. That's right, that's the main event. And joining us now as we kick things off in rapid fashion with Fight Network's Cody Saftic. Cody, we've got Cub Swanson and Artem Lobov Saturday night.
Yes, big fireworks coming from the UFC.
You and I were discussing this earlier. To me, Cub Swanson is coming off the biggest fight of his career. That fight was many people's fight of the year in 2016. Is Artem Lobov the logical follow-up? And when we look at the featherweight division, what were the options?
Yeah, see, that's exactly it. If you're a guy like Cub Swanson, you're gearing up for what could perhaps be your last title run. 33 years old, definitely got a lot of damage, a lot of wear and tear on the body, but you know what? Still considered, maybe in the prime of his career, still considered one run left in him. If you're looking at this division, however, he got decisively beat by Frank Yeager, decisively beat by Max Holloway. Not looking to get another fight with Jose Aldo, who's the champ right now, and also has a very decisive victory over him back in the WEC days. Then you look at the rest of the division, guys like Ricardo Lamas, who has the victory over him. We were talking earlier who is Korean Zombie booked up with, but the rumor is that Ricardo Lamas and Korean Zombie are supposed to get paired up on the Long Island card. Whatever the case is that the featherweight division's got a bit of a logjam. It's ultra talented, but if you're a guy like Cub Swanson, you're 33. You got to compete now. You got to stay active. And even though stay busy fights are usually a really bad idea in MMA, Cub Swanson's the kind of guy that he comes from that old school mentality. He's not going to turn down an opportunity to compete, and he looks at Lobov as a guy that's called him out. Well, hey, you just barked up the wrong tree here, and he's going to go in there and he's going to do what he does best. But I can understand why he didn't turn it down. That being said, I think a lot of managers and a lot of people would have told Cub Swanson outright, this is risky, this is not worth it, don't even bother. But that's not his mentality.
No, I think you just look at it, though. I think those four losses to the guys that you would have there, Holloway, Aldo, Lamas, and Edgar, I think that's a really... It's unfortunate for Cub Swanson because I think a number of those losses, I mean, we're talking years and years ago at that point. But I think those losses definitely hurt him now. But at the same time, I look at this card, and if you had done Chan Sung Jung and Cub Swanson as your main event, I think that's a really big main event for television, especially when you consider that Swanson fight with Doo Ho Choi, they replayed at Christmas Eve and did almost 5 million viewers. So a lot of people saw that fight, and I don't sense the momentum that could have been if Cub Swanson had a dance partner for this card on Saturday that people could really sink their teeth into, which I just don't feel Artem Lobov is that guy that people are really getting jazzed about for a main event fight.
Yeah, I totally get it, but the option probably just wasn't there for them. Maybe they want to book a guy like Korean Zombie Chang Sung Jung, and maybe he was injured, or maybe, whatever the case may be, we don't know if these guys are readily available. What we do know is that Artem Lobov was readily available. When Cub Swanson talked to the UFC and asks for the best opponent available, and Lobov's the guy that comes back, I think that just goes to show you that, well, we don't really got a whole lot of options. Now, if you're a fan, if you're the UFC and you're matchmaking, you're trying to market this card, yeah, you know what? We've got the number 4 guy in the world taking on an unheralded, unranked contender. Does that sell? Probably not. But what you do have here is a good stylistical matchup. And you got two guys that are known for putting on good shows, putting on entertaining fights. And so even in that, if you want a good fight with Cub Swanson to go out there and see what he can really do and open up and be creative and have fun. And you know how Cub Swanson likes to fight confident with his hands low and put on a spectacular performance. Do you go and you stick him in with a guy like Lamas, who could definitely go out there and neutralize him? Do you put him up with against like Jeremy Stevens, who he had already beaten and had just lost to Moicano? Do you put him up with an unknown guy like Moicano? No, you need something entertaining. I agree 100%. Chang Sung Jung would have been the fight to make. But clearly that's just not something that they were able to do at this time. And so Lobov just feels like that floater opponent. But don't be shocked if Lobov comes out there and does exactly what Robert Whittaker does. And that's, even though people are looking completely past him, he's got a dangerous style. And it's a stylistical matchup. It doesn't favor him, but if he's got any chance in hell, John, it's stand in front of you and throw bombs. And Cub Swanson's style, it lends to that.
I want to go back to this past Saturday's Fox card. We had Demetrious Johnson making his 10th successive title defense of his flyweight championship, dismantling Wilson Reis. I mean, just a dominant performance from Demetrious Johnson. This card did 1,996,000 viewers. It peaked at just over 2.8 million for the main event. And that kind of what have been the main talking points. Incredible performance from Demetrious Johnson in the cage. And yet this is the second lowest Fox number they've ever done, with the other one being Vancouver last summer, where they were preempted in a bunch of markets.
Yeah, that's the issue. I mean, whether that's a fight, as I'm talking about Lobov not being able to sell as a contender, I mean, I really look at this recent Fox card as being Hayes not being able to sell on this. We talked about, should the UFC go in full board, try to market the fact that he was trying to tie Anderson Silva's record, and, you know, for the most part, I didn't feel like they really did. Maybe they're going to try to go full board on he's trying to break Anderson Silva's record, and that's going to be the big fight for Demetrious Johnson. But very much so, if you're DJ, he's got nothing to be ashamed of. He has a legendary career. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and I think rightfully so, he's in many people's opinions one of the best all time. Whether or not they're willing to pay money for him, or whether or not they're willing to tune in live to see him, I guess the fans just haven't really resonated with him as a champion or as him as a marketable fighter. But I keep hearing the talk of, well, he should go up to 135 and fight somebody. It's not on him. It's not on the champion to have to jump up and do that. And what I mean by is 10 pounds is a big thing. If you jump up and you lose, then it kind of changes everything. It kind of taints the legacy a little bit. At the end of the day, and I've heard this argument, and I hate this argument, John, is people are saying, well, you know, even though he tied Anderson Silva's record is so much more impressive because, you know, he fought actual contenders. First of all, that's a lie. Anderson Silva fought a number of guys that probably weren't the most spectacular of challengers. But also, if you're Demetrious Johnson, you've fought everybody they've put in front of you. But let's take him out of the conversation. Well, who are the best flyweights in recent memory outside Demetrious Johnson? Well, we got Joseph Benavidez. Okay, well, we've already taken him out a number of times. Well, we've got John Dodson. Well, we've taken out him a number of times too. Well, Ian McCall was good. Yeah, well, after the draw, I defeated him as well. It doesn't matter who they've put in front of Demetrious Johnson, he's beaten them. And even though I think the guy's legendary, the fans, they're just clearly not willing to put that price point on him. So if he wants to sell the big pay-per-view, if he wants that big fight, then he'll move up. But he doesn't have to. And it wouldn't bother me as a fan. Maybe it would bother somebody else, but those opinions shouldn't matter to him. He's got a family. He's got a great resume and a life beyond fighting. So good on Demetrious Johnson.
Yeah, listen, this guy is also, I mean, this was on the lower scale. He's done perfectly healthy Fox numbers in the past. Some even big Fox numbers if you want to go back when he fought John Dodson the first time and you had the support, which this card I feel did have some support in Michelle Watterson because she just did that big number with Paige Van Zandt. But nevertheless, I think that if you look at Demetrious Johnson, the other thing here is that if you are going to make him a Fox attraction, he's not incentivized to go out there and make sure this does 4 million viewers. That's on the promotion. He's not paid any more if it does 3 million viewers or 4 million viewers or 30 million viewers. If he's fighting, he's got his fixed amount that he is going to make on Fox. He's got a win bonus he can make. But on pay-per-view, that's where you're incentivized. You will share in how well the pay-per-view does. Not on Fox. So I don't even see an argument that Demetrious Johnson, listen, that's the promotions department. That's their job to go out there and sell me. I'm going to win my fights and on Fox, that's all you're incentivized to do. On pay-per-view, you can talk up your fight. You can try to make it as big as possible. There's at least an incentive there. The other thing that everyone is throwing around is this money fight and money fight. Can we reel it in of how big Demetrious Johnson, Cody Garbrandt would be? Listen, I would be the first guy to sign up and want to watch that fight. I would love to see that fight. But let's be realistic here, that not every guy going up a weight class and two champions fighting signifies a gigantic pay-per-view, which Demetrious Johnson and Cody Garbrandt would not be.
No, but that's why you need other stuff on the card, obviously. I think when the UFC tries to put on one singular fight and try to sell the audience one singular fight, well, it has to be the mega fight. It has to be Conor McGregor versus X, or it has to be Ronda Rousey versus X. Anybody else, is going to have good supporting cast on the main card. And you look at
Isn't that by definition though? Then your attraction is not a money fight if it needs all of that support though.
Yeah, but there's always going to be the fights that intrigue people, right? If you're looking at Tyron Woodley's one of those guys that's talked about the money fight. And it's no disrespect to him. He is a fantastic welterweight champion, but he himself is not a money fight. Not like anybody's running to pay money to watch Tyron Woodley. But if
few guys are. Like, few guys and women are. There's probably, what would you say, 4 of them currently in the UFC? Maybe 5?
Yeah, and you're stretching that list at some point, hoping a guy like Brock Lesnar comes back in the not so distant future, I should say. But yeah, there's just not a whole lot of big money fights. And you look at some guys where like a Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping's good domestically. Inside the venue, he'll sell it out. He'll do good numbers physically there. But on pay-per-view, not one to sell up a big pay-per-view. You put
and
up
there's
against
value
George
in that.
St. Pierre,
I mean,
it's a money fight all of a sudden.
People shouldn't be diminished by a guy that is simply your strong 350,000 buy guy that can sell out an arena in a couple of minutes like him and Dan Henderson did.
Yeah.
That is a draw. It's not a draw at the scale, the high end of the scale that we equate the word draw with. But that is perfectly fine. I will take 5 Daniel Cormiers that are not going to do 1 million buys every time out, but I can go to different markets, sell out venues with, and do a healthy 300,000 buys on pay-per-view. Those guys don't grow on trees either.
No, but I just feel like, let's say you're a Michael Bisping. You got this big fight with George St. Pierre. Let's say that fight with George St. Pierre is off the table. Well, conceivably, you're going to have to fight Yoel Romero. Now, Michael Bisping's the kind of guy that might be able to talk to himself out of the Yoel Romero fight and win a Robert Whittaker fight. Do you headline a pay-per-view with Michael Bisping versus Robert Whittaker? No. You can't. What kind of number would that do? Now, could you put Demetrious Johnson versus Cody Garbrandt as the co-feature or the main event and have the Bisping fight as the co-feature and try to load up the card and put a good heavyweight attraction? And I'm not going to say putting CM Punk on the card, but you know what I mean. They have options to draw interest and to draw a crowd. But unless it's McGregor or Rousey, they really need to put everything on the card and have put their best foot forward in order to sell a decent pay-per-view. But these days with dwindling numbers, it seems like if they're looking to build stars, they don't have these big mega stars. And everybody just now trying to avoid fights and waiting for the big fight. It turns it into the boxing model where you've just had so many great champions avoid each other because the money's just not right. The timing's just not right. And then it's not a circus, but it just changes things. It changes the aura of the UFC where the top guy is supposed to fight the second guy.
I have lots to talk to you about, so let's quickly go through here. Last things on the Fox card. What do you do next with Robert Whittaker, who you brought up?
Yeah, Robert Whittaker. I mean, if you look at the fact that he's had now a lengthy winning streak inside the UFC, this was really the first marquee victory. The first one where I know he's beaten guys like Uriah Hall, he's beaten guys like Derek Brunson, but to me, this was the one that really stood out. I mean, Jacare was largely considered the number 2 guy behind Yoel Romero, and in a lot of people's opinion, Jacare had defeated Yoel Romero. Close split decision in that fight. So if you're Robert Whittaker, you just jumped a lot of people in the pecking order. But we see such a massive logjam at 185 pounds that conceivably he's going to have to fight again at some point. I think the logical fight would be to put up him against Gegard Mousasi. But with Gegard Mousasi, we just don't know really realistically what's going on with his contract and whether he's going to be sticking around in the UFC for the foreseeable future. So Robert Whittaker's sitting in a good spot right now. He's still young. He just picked up a gigantic victory. But Yoel Romero's not likely to take anything. He's likely to sit on the sideline. And if I'm Robert Whittaker and I'm just one step below that, I don't want to take anything super dangerous, but a win over Gegard Mousasi would solidify my spot. And a loss to Gegard Mousasi wouldn't really damage him that much because he's still young and Mousasi's ranked so highly. So that might be a fight that I'd be inclined to watch for sure. But beyond that, I mean, I'm sure they're going to try to do Robert Whittaker versus Anderson Silva or something ridiculous of that nature.
I feel if I was Robert Whittaker, that would have been the name I threw out afterwards. But Bisping ain't happening. So why don't you throw out, there's a vacancy, they badly need someone, and if Whittaker felt that, hey, I can turn around and fight the beginning of June against Anderson Silva, that's a big marquee fight for him that, you know, there's obviously risk involved in fighting Anderson Silva, but one that there's a ton of reward to that fight.
Yeah, to that point, I agree 100% because as a fan and as someone who's match-made fights both professionally and on the amateur level in the past, Robert Whittaker versus Kelvin Gastelum, I love it. But that's almost destroying 2 young prospects that are building themselves up that could potentially challenge down in the future. What they were doing with Kelvin Gastelum versus Anderson Silva is exactly that. It's a winnable fight for Kelvin Gastelum that he can go out and look good, gain some of that shine. Anderson Silva is still always going to have that big marquee name attached to him. And that's exactly what they want to do. Kelvin Gastelum falls out of the fight what do you put together? Well, if Robert Whittaker is not damaged, he's good to go. You insert a guy like that in for sure. So even though I would like to say hopefully Kelvin Gastelum's not suspended for too long, I hope he returns, and him and Robert Whittaker would be a fantastic fight. I think from a logical standpoint, you'd probably go with the Anderson Silva matchup. The fact is Anderson Silva's, even though he believes he will, he's never going to fight for a title ever again. At this point, you got to use him in those big fights, but to try to build along the future. Don't just have him in squash matches, and God forbid he kills guys that are up and coming and title contenders like a Derek Brunson in an awful fight. But this would be a good fight, and I think a guy like Robert Whittaker has a lot to gain in it.
Yeah, it's as much as people have kind of maligned this Bisping-George St. Pierre fight because of the delays and all the holdups to it. You put those two on an island, the remaining parts of this middleweight division are incredible. Like, this is just an unbelievable top 10 picture of fights you can make. Unfortunately, a lot of the guys are not really incentivized because it just feels like they're hamsters running on a wheel at the moment, that they're taking extremely dangerous fights. You're getting paid for it, but at the same time, these fights, it just feels, is Robert Whittaker or Gegard Mousasi that further ahead in this division? Or is it simply, you've taken a step forward, but now you got to take on the guy right behind you as well?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. And
Luke Rockhold's back in this mix.
It's a very, 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 very loaded division. And if you lose a fight, that's exactly it. You pop out of the mix. But for a lot of these guys, even though the division is very, very talented, you look at Luke Rockhold and he's not exactly a spring chicken. You look at Jacare, you look at Yoel Romero, you look at some of these guys, they're not all that young. So they have to keep busy.
Chris Weidman's been through the ringer. I mean, with his surgeries he's had and now where he is at his career. I mean, this is crazy. When you go back to think of the day after UFC 193 when the world was just looking at Holly Holm's victory and we were a few weeks away from Weidman defending against Luke Rockhold. And look how fast this sport moves as we fast forward to today with Holly Holm and Chris Weidman.
Yeah, and that's what actually takes us back to the original conversation here about Artem Lobov versus Cub Swanson, is that there's an inherent danger in stay busy fights. Because this is not a basketball game where you're like, you know what, we're just going to take on a B level team to try to keep ourselves sharp. This is fighting. And I'm not going to toot my own horn and say, oh, I told you guys about Jacare. But I distinctively said, it's very, very, very dangerous if you're a guy like Ronaldo Jacare Souza, who's taking essentially stay busy fights. Can he beat Chris Camozzi? Absolutely. Can he beat Tim Boetsch? Absolutely. Can he beat Robert Whittaker? Absolutely. Not so fast. You can't look past anybody, first of all. But this is a game that you could easily get hit. Look back at that Tim Boetsch fight. Tim Boetsch actually zaps him with a decent right hand. The result is he takes Tim Boetsch down and immediately submits him. If you look at this Whittaker fight, on paper, it's, well, Jacare is so good on the ground. Well, Whittaker's got a distinctive stand-up advantage. So now you're looking at the wrestling. Well, Jacare does get him down. But if you can't submit a guy right away, what does rounds 2 look like? What does rounds 3 look like? Stay busy fights, that's dangerous. It's always been dangerous. And with 4-ounce MMA gloves on, it is extremely, extremely dangerous.
So you're obviously picking Artem Lobov on Saturday.
I'm saying if you're a gambling man and you're looking at the odds, Artem Lobov most definitely has a chance. And what I mean by that, John, is it's just like the way Cub Swanson fights. He keeps with both his hands down. He likes to enter the pocket. He likes to have exciting fights. That'll be his own worst enemy. Yeah, I thought it was fight of the year against Doo Ho Choi. But you know what also happened against Doo Ho Choi? He got rocked. And he got damaged severely. And you look at some of these performances in his career, he is a hittable target. This is scheduled for 5 rounds. Now let's look at Artem Lobov. It's so easy to laugh this guy off. What's his pro record? 13-12? I think it's 14-12. But what you have to look at is a couple of things. First of all, this guy's competed anywhere between 145 pounds and 165 pounds. He often has taken fights week of. He's often flown outside of his comfort zone, gone to an opponent's backyard, and look at his entire regional run. It's been like that. And he wins against the hometown guy a lot. So it's easy to just write this guy off. Last fight against Teruto Ishihara. Same thing. He's to the tune of a 2.5 to 1 dog. But Ishihara fights not similar to Swanson, but similar in the sense that both of his hands down, darts in and out of the pocket, relies heavily on his footwork. Lobov's a guy that's been finished one single time since 2011. If anything, John, he's very durable. And that durability is just going to keep him in the fight. Keep him in the fight long enough that if he lands his big power punches over a guy like Cub Swanson, there's no doubt you can there's no doubt you can clip a guy like Swanson who's had his jaw broken two occasions, has been knocked down in the past, and is a guy that's known to clown with opponents. You talk to guys that are close to Cub Swanson, and they'll tell you, he's known to look past guys certain times. He gets so confident, it doesn't matter what he does on fight night. It depends what I do on fight night. And as a result, he tries to come out in that flow state. But against Artem Lobov, sometimes called by Conor McGregor as Artem Flobov, he's not below catching him with something the longer this fight plays out. My last point to that is, he definitely is not going to benefit greatly from Conor McGregor being off in this party bender right now. Because having all those rounds with McGregor, once again, McGregor doesn't fight like Cub Swanson, but it's that movement and it's that footwork. And having to track a guy like McGregor in the gym will no doubt help him track a guy like Cub Swanson, who will give him targets, will present targets, and present opportunities. So am I picking Artem Lobov straight up? I'm going to have to say no. Cub Swanson's the number 4 guy in the world.
You made quite the argument
I'm saying
against your own pick.
Yeah, I'm saying if you look at it realistically, and we were looking at it on the net, worldwide, Swanson's 4-5 in the world. Lobov's 50th in the world. What I'm saying is, odds is a crazy game. MMA is a crazy sport. And if you're going to say that he's a 7-1 favorite over Artem Lobov, you're disrespecting Artem Lobov, and you don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah, and I'll make it clear. I completely feel Artem Lobov can win this fight. I'm not picking him to win, but my argument is that, A, this to me is not a very sexy main event to sell to people because I don't feel many people know who Artem Lobov is. And that's why for Cub Swanson, this fight is all risk and no reward because I feel if he loses, that is it for him having an opportunity at another championship fight again in his career. And with a win, I think he's in the exact same spot. And sometimes for fighters, the ones that are just, I'll say yes to any fight that is presented to me, it has its positives. The UFC is always going to rely on you. You are always going to get regular offers to fight. At the same time, you're not always going to get the most attractive fights. And you sometimes need that buffer, your manager, whoever, to step in and be strategic and not play the ego game and be like, hey, we just are coming off this huge win over Doo Ho Choi, where he was christened as the next one at 145 pounds. We won. We had a fight of the year, and Artem Lobov is the best you can do for us. That doesn't do anything for our guy, who is Cub Swanson. And you play hardball.
Yeah, but you talked about how these guys aren't incentivized if they're not going to be on a UFC pay-per-view. And in this guy's case, if you're a guy like Cub Swanson, he's not incentivized. He's not incentivized to go take on this big fight or this small fight. It's all the same. If they give him a contract that says Artem Lobov on it, and they give him the same contract that says Ricardo Lamas on it, do you think the price point's going to be any different? No, it's not.
It's a dangerous game to play, though, when you're looking at things then in that way.
I agree. But let's say you're Cub Swanson. Let's say you're a fighter. You're obviously an optimist. If you're not optimistic, you're done in this game. If you're pessimistic, then you're not going to believe you're going to win, and it's all over for you. If you're realistic, then you're realistically looking at this fight as super dangerous. You're not going to take it. But he's optimistic. And that's the way he's always fought his career. And he knows, okay, I'm 33 years old. I go out there and I fight Artem Lobov. I believe it's a low-risk fight. I believe in myself. He's almost betting on himself. Because he goes out there and he has a good performance against Lobov. Then he makes his base pay. His win bonus should, according to him, according to the odds makers, should come easy. I mean, the guy's a 7-1 favorite. That should be an easy victory. So you're looking at a relatively easy victory and a good opponent that would allow you the opportunity to go out there and have a performance bonus. How is Artem Lobov not tailor-made to Cub Swanson's style? He is. So Cub Swanson goes out there, knocks out Lobov the way he believes he does, doesn't move him up the rankings, doesn't move him down the rankings, but he's staying even keel and he's walking away with $150,000 out of it. You're saying that if he has a good manager, and I don't disagree with this, but what you're saying is his manager should probably pull him aside and say, listen, man, we're coming off a gigantic win. Let's sit on the sidelines. But then the question is posed, well, what are we waiting for? Okay, well, we've already looked at the fact that he's not going to fight any of the top 3 guys in the division. And if Korean Zombie is booked up with Ricardo Lamas and that's not the option, then realistically, who else is he going to fight? Is he going to fight Moicano? No. Is he going to fight Darren Elkins? Good God, I do not want to fight Darren Elkins if I'm Cub Swanson. I'd much rather fight Artem Lobov. Is he going to fight Brian Ortega? That's not a name whatsoever. At least with Lobov, it's perceived as low risk. He's a fair enough name, and at least lets me just wait around until something opens up and presents itself. But if I'm 33, I'm looking at, geez, my career might not have a whole lot of time left in it. And if you're Cub Swanson especially, a lot of injuries. He's had bad hand surgeries dating back to 2011, I believe. And if you see his hands, John, it looks like Frankenstein. It's just been operated on so many times. Surely he sees the light at the end of the tunnel. So he's got to get as many fights as possible in. And, to quote the great John Ramdeen, he's got to line his pockets with the big fights right now as he can. So this is not a big fight, but he's trying to line his pockets, make as much money while he can.
No, there's numerous factors that go into it, 100%. And that the fact is, I mean, Cub Swanson, to be honest, it's great that you have a fight like Doo Ho Choi. It doesn't give you that kind of leverage that they're going to move heaven and earth for Cub Swanson.
Well,
I mean,
that's exactly
where
it.
I think you and I are putting a ton of focus on this fight night card. That, I mean, when you look at this card, very good card. When you go down, like, there is something intriguing in just about every fight, and we'll quickly go through that at the end. But quickly, Tough kicked off earlier this week. We've got Team Garbrandt, Team Dillashaw, Hector Urbina already gone because he couldn't make weight on the show. He came in heavy for this fight and had to tap out before the fight could take place with James Krause. And our first week, Gilbert Smith defeats Seth Bashinsky, and now we look ahead to week 2. But this concept, when it was first presented, did it have your intrigue? As someone that watches Tub, you and I think, are two of the last that have been watching all the seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously they're going with these themes the last number of seasons, whether it's an all-champion season, whether it's, the Black Stallions versus American Top Team, whether it's crowning of the first ever female strawweight champion. They're looking at a lot of themes. This theme is, to me, something that I've been calling for years, in the sense that I was a gigantic fan of Tough 4. You bring guys that, and good guys too. I mean, if you look at it for what it was, Pat Cote was on that season. Travis Luter's on that season. You had good guys that were not, people are going to totally say Travis Luter,
who cost Anderson Silva, still
guy.
Holding that record of title defenses.
I'll tell you what,
Anderson.
if he would have made weight for that fight, who knows?
The Michael Jordan of jiu-jitsu.
He started out well. There's no denying that he takes Anderson Silva down, mounts him, and then is so gassed by the end of one single round, John. One single round. I look at this season, and if they're looking for the theme of bringing guys back, like I said, I'm all for it. I was down to have season 4 guys, good guys, Shoney Carter, whatever. They're named people. It's easier for the audience to relate to, oh, what has that guy been up to? Oh, I'm going to jump on that. At least what it seemed to. But even though I'm a mega fan, I love seeing Apache Junction's fighters coming out there. I like Seth Baczynski. I like all these guys. But to the casual fan, you're not bringing yet anything super interesting. In prior seasons of Tough, you're looking at someone who could come out of here and factor into the division, right? And that's the way it's always been. There's a reason why they never brought these comeback seasons around anymore. Because essentially these guys, they're done with their run. And when you look at this season in particular, look at the high-end picks on here. Jesse Taylor is a high-end pick. A guy like Hader Hassan, I think, went 4th overall. Ramsey Nijim, who certainly shouldn't be really fighting at 170 pounds. Joe Stevenson on the season. Do any of these guys, does the winner of this season jump into the UFC and factor in whatsoever in the welterweight division?
The only two. Yeah, maybe.
James Krause is a lightweight, so he doesn't factor in the welterweight division. He should have just hung out at lightweight anyways. That one makes no sense to me.
No, to me, this is a season where I think James Krause you have to favor, and I feel this probably could get Eddie Gordon back in the UFC. These are the realistic outcomes of this season.
Okay, you talk about Hector Urbina coming in heavy. I'm shocked that Eddie Truck Gordon can make 170 pounds, let alone is going to attempt to do it multiple times. And when Eddie
I asked him about that. He did a media thing in Buffalo, and I asked him that exact question about having to make weight. And I mean, it's stunning to me that this guy, I mean, I have no knowledge of how far he goes in the show, but you have to imagine that if he goes far, that is insanity. I have hated this idea of the making weight that many times in 6 or 7 weeks. I think that is just, it's irresponsible in 2017 that we're still doing this, where these guys have to kill themselves 3 times, and and some of these guys they should be fighting at a weight class above, and here you're asking them to make weight 3 times in the time of the filming.
Yeah, and that's what really doesn't make sense to me, is that you look at it in their 170-pound, that's the season, is 170-pound fighters, right? So oftentimes you're going to get mostly lightweights. If James Krause was competing against mostly lightweights, I'd agree with you. How could this guy not be a shoo-in to win the season? It'd be almost like Tim Elliott competing in the All-Champion season. Tim Elliott was a bit of a cut above. Going into that season, everybody picked him as he's probably going to win the season, and guess what? He probably did. Similar to Roy Nelson. You put an established fighter in a household with guys that never achieves that level, he's probably going to win. Roy Nelson, same thing. When you look at James Krause, he's technically speaking the only guy in the house that's currently still established, that probably still has a reputable world ranking attached to his name. So why would he jump on this show? Well, if they're all 55ers, I get it. But when I look at this season, I see guys like Jesse Taylor, and I see guys like Eddie Truck Gordon, and Hector Urbina is obviously no longer on it. But there's a number of guys in the season that are big guys. And you look at that risk versus reward factor. We just talked about it, about some of these matchmaking decisions. There's a guy like Cub Swanson. What's the reward if you're James Krause? Are you giving up potentially your UFC contract if you go out there and you get hurt or you get injured or you get knocked out or whatever the case is? I don't know. And what's the upside? That you win the Ultimate Fighter
$250,000
and you get $250,000. That's the
for
upside.
all the this to me.
He hasn't fought in 16 months, John, and now he's going to try to fight 3 times.
Yeah,
that makes no sense.
It's wonderful for the guy that wins this. There's a nice prize at the end, but I mean, they explained on the show they're getting $10,000 a fight, $5,000 finishing bonus, and to me, it's like if that's the level. Well, these are the fighters you're going to attract. I mean, people were looking at this that, man, they're going to bring back all these different big names, but you would have had to up the amount. Like these guys, $10,000 a fight, a lot of them can get it elsewhere. The ones that you would assume they would go after for a show like this, and ones that turn down the going on tough. I mean, that was the confusing part for a lot. Like, what is the incentive for a James Krause? I mean, $250,000 is hard to turn down if you feel you can run the table, but you come up short on that and you make $30,000 for 3 fights. I mean, that's a tough reality to look at.
Yeah, I agree. And you look at the last time he was on Tough. I mean, he got beat by the unheralded Justin Lawrence at the time. I mean, anything can happen when you stick somebody in this Tough house. And if you're James Krause, I mean, he's a successful business owner too. I mean, he's got good people under his banner. Megan Anderson, the Invicta 145-pound champs there. Zach Cummings is there. Known as a very good gym out of that Kansas, Missouri area. He's got other things going for him. The thing that I find confusing is that the last time we saw James Krause professionally in action was against Shane Campbell 16 months ago. So this guy's been off the sideline. He said he tore his groin. Now I just don't understand why a guy that's coming off a year plus layoff, who's a successful business owner, who's torn his groin, although is on a two fight winning streak inside the UFC, why would that guy decide, I want to put myself in the Ultimate Fighter house where my coaching staff, they're gone. That familiarity that I have in my gym, that's all gone. I'm going to put myself, and I'm a full grown man. I'm not some young kid. It's not like, oh, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. I could win a UFC contract. I already have a UFC contract. So I just don't really get it. But you look at this guy being the favorite. Oftentimes when you're just glaring the favorite, in this sport especially, something can happen. And I look at him competing against a lot of big guys, and I think that would be something that could happen.
The size is the biggest detriment to James Krause, but
Eddie Gordon is twice his size.
Yeah. I mean, that's when you look at the Jesse Taylors and Eddie Gordons and compare that to James Krause. I mean, that's where he will potentially run into problems. We'll see. Quickly, the World Series of Fighting has announced they will rebrand themselves as the Professional Fighters League in January of next year. And it feels like, kind of a non-team version of the IFL. It's like the Bellator tournament format with the IFL structure with a regular season, playoffs, and a championship. 7 weight classes. They will have guaranteed monthly pay for the fighters, which I like for the fighters. That's a wonderful cushion to know you have a guaranteed money every month, and a minimum 3 fights a year. Just reading the letter that was sent out to the fighters and the outline, maybe it's the pessimistic side of me, Cody, but I just see so many issues that arise out of this. I mean, from just injuries that will inevitably occur and just the structure of this, on top of the fact that we have learned through one of the biggest detriments to Bellator's tournament format was that this is prize fighting where you have the ability to match fighters that the public wants to see and put the fights together. And now you've created this format that will prevent you from putting the fights together, and you're tied to a structure, to a tournament kind of structure, especially when you get to the playoffs. We'll see. This has not worked in the past. So are you optimistic it can work under this leadership?
No, definitely. Under this leadership, no way. Honestly, when you're looking at it on paper, I like the idea. I like the concept. I was a gigantic fan of the IFL. The key notable difference, although there's not real teams here, is that the IFL had the coaches fights, which was a real drawing factor. Do I want to see Pat Miletich fight Renzo Gracie? Yeah, I absolutely do. Do I want to see Jeremy Horn get in there with somebody? Yeah, of course I do. Those are good times. IFL was huge for me because it was on after school, so I used to come back like after elementary and high school. I don't think it was on in elementary, but after high school, it was on. It was a great part of my upbringing. It was a great part of getting me into fighting.
But that
times
thing burned
have changed.
Through money quick.
Did they ever? And what you don't understand is that when you're fielding out teams, and these are not just teams of nobodies. I mean, even the fact that you're putting Ryan Schultz and Bart Pelashewski and Chris Hordecki and Devin Cole, and those guys all cost money. And they had one-off fights like Jens Pulver, Cole Escovedo, and stuff like that, where surely they're paying money for. But you're trying to draw in this audience. And as a result, they burn through a lot of money. The thing is that times have changed since then. I don't think that model works anymore. If you're Ray Sefo and Co. and you're putting this product out, they're looking at this like, well, we want to make it like the NBA and the NHL where it's a season, a formatted thing. But what they don't get is that when their season's no longer on, everybody else's MMA promotions is still on. It's still yearly, a year-long thing for all of that. And you look at World Series of Fighting, they burned through a lot of money, and they really, really struggled to build stars and to gain a foothold in the MMA viewership world. As a result, they actually did build a couple stars, and all those stars have left them. Marlon Moraes looking to get out. You had Justin Gaethje, free agent. Dave Branch has already signed with the UFC as an upcoming fight. If you really look at it for what it is, World Series of Fighting has crashed. You're going to take the parts of that, stick it in this new format, which is realistically, MMA is not like any other sport. You can't just have a season, but we're going to try that. And these guys are going to fight for $1 million? Well, you need to tell me that you have subpar talent. Not subpar. I do not mean to disrespect these guys. But when you got guys like Tyler Stinson and the Josh Berkmans of the world who can rise and become title challengers and challengers, you're gonna let one of these guys fight for $1 million if he wins the tournament? I don't know. It seems like it's a big money grab. And
to me, this is not like, as you said earlier, this is fighting, and fighting is not baseball, and it's not hockey where we can go out and do this every couple of weeks. So let us suppose that we're gonna have two guys that are gonna fight in our quote unquote regular season in January. Are they going to have, what is it going to be? 3 fights that make up your regular season where you're going to have all these fighters that have identical records? Like you'll have at least a couple that are going to be 2-1 or 3-0. Then they go to a playoff, supposedly, which who knows how many rounds that consists of, and a championship final. Like, how can you realistically believe that these fighters are either going to fight 4 to 5 times a year, or your regular season is going to consist of 2 fights to get a third playoff and then a championship? Like, it just, the logistics of this to me, like you're going to have, it's inevitable that it's going to happen, that you're going to get to your final at the end of this and people are going to be hurt. They can't make it. How do we have subs? It just seems really confusing, and the format hasn't been laid out. So maybe we're all going to be surprised. They have a ton of investment money behind this, but I don't know. It just, MMA does not lend itself very well to just a structured sports league with wins and losses and playoffs and expecting certain guys to just be able to turn around. If I sign a first baseman to a multi-year contract, I can reasonably anticipate he can compete for 3 seasons for me under this contract. He might get hurt. It might backfire, but I can expect him to be a day-to-day player. Fighting, that is a lot of faith you are putting in because of the rigors of training and the wear and tear that these fighters go through. Like the 7 weight classes, we're going to do all of this in 10 months.
I couldn't agree more. And I'll play the lightning rod here and draw the attention, so to speak. But here's just like a real greasy theory that I've been looking at. If you look at the available free agents that are left in the MMA market right now, well, most of the high-end guys are obviously signed to the UFC. There's a good chunk of the free agents that have been signed to Bellator. World Series of Fighting has been really operating with a lot of the guys that are left over. The guys that are still talented, either on their way up or whatever the case is, but they do have some good talent. You're folding World Series of Fighting, and now you're creating this new league. It's not crazy to think that the roster is going to look a lot like the World Series of Fighting roster, because those guys, now that the World Series of Fighting is folded, are all free agents, and you need to now start a new league where you're signing up a bunch of talent. Well, what available talent is there? Most of the guys from World Series of Fighting. Here's the trouble thing for me. Most of the guys that fought from World Series of Fighting were all managed by the same guy. If you look at a lot of their cards, especially the last one, Blagoy, Ivanov, Sean Jordan, it's like 75% managed by the same guy. So what's going to happen when you have these tournaments where most of the fighters are managed by the same guy and you're fighting for $1 million prize purse at the end of it? Is it all going to go to the same guy? I'm not so sure. But this league, I look at that MMA Alliance, first publicly trading company. I'm looking at this and it makes no sense to me. It makes absolutely 0 sense. But they're buying properties and they're signing reputable people to it. So there's got to be some substance to it. And then the other day it's like, no, they're officially getting sued. It's all a big charaz. Stocks dropped half since they've put it public. So there's obviously something more than meets the eye. Is this going to work out? I think it's going to look a lot like Shine fights. So no. But Is it possible? Yes. And if it is, I hope it does, because honestly, fighters need platforms. They need the salary, like you said. I would love the idea of these guys getting at least some type of monetary gain during training camps, where even if the fight does fall off, people say, well, they might fake an injury. These guys aren't looking to fake an injury. If a guy gets hurt, it'd be nice if he got a couple bucks for the training camp he's in. I like that a lot.
I like that a lot, that these fighters, God forbid some fighters have a stable income.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that to me is, That to me is a big issue of these fighters that I don't think fans truly appreciate, is their month to month living when you're not making millions of dollars in this sport. You don't know when your next fight is coming, and you may get hurt. It's very likely you're going to get hurt. And having that on your shoulders, the idea that I fight here, I may not get another fight for 8 months. And what do I do in that gap? I've got to take this pay, which is not all that great to begin with, and I've got to spread that out over 7 or 8 months. That's how a lot of these guys have to live.
Well, look at a guy that's making his UFC debut, or look at a guy that's fighting for, let's say, $10,000 to $20,000. If this guy's really serious and this is his run, and I just got signed to the big show, this is finally my chance. Let's say I take 8 weeks for a camp. 8 weeks. And that's not a 10-week camp. That's not a 12-week camp. That's an 8-week camp. You've got to now, presumably, take the 8 weeks off work. If you're really serious about this and you really want to make a run, put your best foot forward. Not everybody takes time off work, but that's probably your best option. You take the time off work. That in itself, if you're not getting paid, is costing you a couple $1,000s. Now you look at the fact that you're bringing in training partners. You have to eat healthy. You have to change your lifestyle around completely. You know what? And you come back from a bad practice, you got to get those deep body massages, deep tissue massages, I should say. You got to put a lot of investment into your life. On top of that, you break relationships going through training camp. You know what I mean?
Your fight could fall out at week 7.
And that's what I'm getting at.
You don't get your camp refunded.
Cole Miller left his family for 2 months. Cole Miller went to ATT and put a world-class training camp in. Cole Miller did all those things. And when his fight fell off, and they gave him, according to him, 25% of what his show money would have been, he's now effectively lost money on this. You can't be a professional athlete in 20 fights in your UFC career like Cole Miller and coming out breaking even because you've had to pay for two training camps to fight one time. It's the sad, unfortunate part about it. But at the end of the day, I am the top advocate for fighters should get paid more. I 100% agree with it. But at the end of the day, fighters are not in there for the money. They're doing it because this is something they'd be doing otherwise. When MMA became popular, there were still people going to Gladiator Challenge and King of the Cage and fighting in the steel cage because that's who they were. That's what they want to do. They want to prove the martial arts. So no one's being forced to be in there. If you're a fighter, you're choosing to be a fighter. That is on you at the end of the day. But yeah, I hope they all make millions of dollars and they rightfully deserve it.
That is going to wrap us up. We've got Bellator coming up Friday night with Pitbull Strauss number 4.
I want to talk about that, but I guess we're out of time.
Your pick in this fight.
I got to go Strauss. I mean, he's been off for a little while, but
that means we're going to get a 5th.
Fight, hey, I want to ask you, by the way, can you think of any other 4-fight affair in MMA? Happens in kickboxing, has happened in boxing, but can you think of any 2 fighters that have fought 4 times in MMA?
I thought we were going to get there with Quinton and Vanderlei.
Yeah,
but we didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
None come to mind.
I couldn't think of any.
Yeah.
And I'm usually pride myself on this kind of thing, but I think it might be the first time.
So history will be made on Friday.
Yeah, nobody's going to tune in, but I sure will be.
It's not Friday night yet. I mean, last week we were talking about Leandro Higo challenging for a title.
Oh,
Boy, did we jinx that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Saturday, as I said, this is a really good card. When you go, Alexis Davis is making her return.
3 title challengers on the prelims. You got Talis Latis, Alexis Davis, and
Jessica Penne is back.
Penne. 3 title challengers on your prelims.
Yeah.
This is a free card. This is a nice looking
Brandon
card.
Moreno, who has been...
versus Justin Ortiz. If that doesn't scream excitement, I don't know what does.
Yeah, that's really strong. And then you have Mike Perry on the card,
Yeah.
Joe Lozon, John Dodson, Ally Aquinta, Diego Sanchez, and Cub Swanson. Like a main card that's got Cub Swanson, Diego Sanchez, John Dodson, Joe Lozon, and Mike Perry. That can't suck. Impossible. And this main card does not have some fun fights on it.
I agree, and that's why when people keep complaining, oh, why is it Lobov? We're all still going to watch it, and we're all still going to have a good time. It was just good bit of matchmaking on this one, and I think it'll be a fun
there's
night.
Great depth to this card. Even Joe Proctor down on the Fight Pass portion.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm really looking forward to this UFC card. And another last point I'll make about Bellator is I feel whenever they have these multiple weekends they all get lost in the shuffle. And I like the fact that after Friday, we have a break until London, and then we have a break until the pay-per-view in New York. There's one card in May, one card in June, and I think both those cards will get the proper amount of attention because they're not all just thrown together where it's just week by week. You're looking at what they have to promote next Friday.
Yeah, also if you look at it, it's like, hey, Bellator's on this today. It's like, oh yeah, nice. Well, it's 4 o'clock in Italy. You can't actually see it. Bellator's on next weekend. All right. Yeah, but it's 4 o'clock from Hungary. You can't actually watch it live. But Bellator's on this weekend. Yeah, but it's from Uckinsville, Connecticut, and it is live, and Cody can watch it and have a great time.
All right. Back in Buffalo at the site of UFC 210, I got a chance to catch up with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson a couple of weeks removed from his loss to Tyron Woodley. We got an update after he had knee surgery and also a tornado that hit South Carolina. So here he is, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson on the MMA Report.
You're just fresh off knee surgery. How's the knee post-surgery?
Oh, man, it's great. I was actually walking back on it the next day. So it was orthoscopic, torn MCL, meniscus tear. So they went in orthoscopically. It was a short surgery, so in and out. They gave me 4 to 6 weeks. So we're looking at September to go out there in the octagon again. So I'm itching the bits to get back out there and do it again.
And when did you notice that this was more than just kind of the typical aches and pains, that this was something significant after the Woodley fight?
It happened in the 5th round. I ended up getting punched in the back of the head. I went back and looked and see exactly where that knee injury happened because I wanted to know. Right after the fight, I wasn't really sure when and during the fight it did happen, but it was about 3 hours after. Once the adrenaline wore off, I was like, this is not just a normal knee ache. Having 4 surgeries previously to this one, I knew that it was something wrong. Didn't really know it was the MCL, but I figured it was some meniscus, and that's what they ended up going in there and shaving off.
When you're looking down the road at September, you've always been one of those guys, whoever I'm presented with, cool. But once you get to a certain level, there is a lot of strategy involved. What is the way that I can navigate this very deep division that is 170 pounds? Do you look at that and say, I have to take the right fights, or is it, I'm happy with whatever's thrown at me?
You know what? It is a little, as a fighter, I do want to fight just anybody. Of course, I got coaches and a management company who wants to make the best decision for me. There's a lot of guys in the top 5 that I would love to fight. Robbie Lawler, for instance, but I hear he's getting ready to fight Donald Cerrone. Condit, but then there again, you're not really sure if he's going to be fighting again. Of course, you got Damian Maia, and he's getting ready to fight Masvidal. So I don't know, man. I don't know who's going to be next. It's kind of up in the air right now.
Is there a part of you that looks that, maybe not rooting one fighter over the other, but a Tyron Woodley loss around here, it's like that always throws a division up in the air?
Oh, it does. But you know what? I have a hard time thinking that there's going to be anybody else in the division. It could happen, but that's going to defeat Tyron. Tyron's a very strong wrestler. He's got a good base. If Damian Maia wins, I think he's going to get that. He's got to get that next title shot. He's definitely earned it. But he's going to have a hard time getting Tyron Woodley to the ground. And obviously, if you're standing up with the guy, you got to watch out for the mean right hand. He can put anybody away with that thing. So yeah. But like you said, with the loss against Tyron, it's going to make this division pretty exciting, man, because you never know what's going to happen.
All right, final question here. We heard you on the MMA Hour this past Monday with Ariel Helwani. A tornado begins as you're on the phone, and this guy finishes the interview. Did everything turn out okay? What was the ramifications of this tornado that I don't think I've ever heard an MMA fighter continue an interview mid-tornado?
It was pretty crazy because that's something we do not get in South Carolina, which is this year's been pretty crazy because another one, a touchdown several months ago. And, we were in the middle of I was actually parked doing the interview with Ariel Helwani, getting ready for these kids to come out because we have an after-school program. I'm on the bus. Next thing you know, you get all these teachers, hundreds of teachers running out, telling everybody to run inside. People in the buses, parents in the school. So we had to run in there, keep the kids calm. But you know what? I'm all about finishing what I started. Finish the interview with Ariel Helwani. It was pretty exciting. I know he loved it, but everything ended up turning out okay.
Everyone was safe.
Oh yeah, everybody was safe.
Well, a total pro here, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson.
That was Stephen Wonderboy Thompson chatting with me in Buffalo last week, right before UFC 210. So we will see what is next for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And it's one of those names where you just feel weird saying it without the nickname, but it does sound a little silly when you repeatedly say Wonderboy in there. But when you look at the welterweight division and what will be next for Stephen Thompson, he threw out the idea of wanting to fight a Robbie Lawler or a Carlos Condit, with Lawler kind of rumored for Donald Cerrone. Carlos Condit, we really don't know what is next for him. You have to wonder where Stephen Thompson is going to fit in. Maybe against, I would say if Damian Maia beats Jorge Masvidal, God, is it really tough to deny that guy a title fight. I would hate to see him have to still wait after beating Masvidal. Now, if Masvidal wins, I could see Stephen Thompson and Masvidal fighting, if that were to occur. I really love that Maia Masvidal fight that is coming up shortly. So maybe that's an option. Man, Thompson, I would love to see any combination of Lawler, Condit, or Donald Cerrone, even a Gunnar Nelson. I mean, there is a lot of options at welterweight with guys that you could theoretically match up with Stephen Thompson. The biggest thing going against him, which, as I brought up there, the best thing that can happen for him is Tyron Woodley losing this title, because then it's new life for a challenger that has multiple losses to the champion. I mean, that is detrimental, as Joseph Benavidez can attest to. I mean, it's been 3.5 years since he last fought Demetrious Johnson, and still he is not guaranteed a third fight if he beats Ben Nguyen coming up. Anyway, we're going to go to our next interview, and this is a guy that is in not the exact same set of circumstances, but one in which all of the guys that Cub Swanson is ranked behind, including the champion, he has losses to. Jose Aldo, Max Holloway, Frankie Edgar, and Ricardo Lamas. It's unfortunate. So Cub Swanson, when you go down all the list of guys at 145 pounds, his next available opponent that was presented to him for this Saturday is Artem Lobov. Now, it's in a main event position, but he's fighting an unranked guy. So this is all risk, minuscule, if any, reward for Cub Swanson. He's not going to jump above Lamas or Edgar in the rankings with a win over Artem Lobov. He can go out there, he can make his money, but this is a very much a keep busy fight for Cub Swanson, and a loss significantly derails Cub Swanson. So he's coming off the biggest fight of his career against Doo Ho Choi. That was a large topic we discussed. So here he is, Cub Swanson on the MMA Report. Cub, first off, what are the final 24, 48 hours before a fight like for you? Are they a stressful period of time? Is it the opposite? Is all the work done and it's just counting down until the fight? Tell us a bit about what these final few days are like before a big fight.
Honestly, it's like a little bit of an emotional roller coaster. The trick is just to stay calm and just, relax. But the more you think about the fight, you get excited, you get nervous, all these things. But, you get used to it after, doing it so many times.
Going back to your last fight, which was here in Toronto, a city you've had a lot of success in, that's a fight that is going to follow you for your entire career that you had with Doo Ho Choi. Moments after the fight, with that sold-out crowd at the Air Canada Centre, were you able to take in that moment immediately after?
Oh, definitely. There's a pretty iconic picture of right after the fight was over.
Yeah.
I just kind of rested, put my arms up, and just soaked it in, like somebody at the beach soaking up the sun. That was awesome, and that crowd they pushed us both. It was amazing.
And at what point are you able to realize you're part of something special here? This is not just another fight. Is it during the actual body of the fight, or is it not till afterwards that you fully understood what that fight was to so many people?
Well, every fight's unique and has a different feeling, but I really didn't realize how great of a fight it was until maybe a month after. It took a while to really settle in. I knew that it was a hard fought battle, but the fans just kept telling me, man, that was awesome. Just a lot more than usual. So, but once I rewatched it so many times and kind of, everything else settled in, it hit me about, at least a few weeks later.
I'm always curious when fighters sit down and watch a fight for the first time that they were just involved in. And specific to the Doo Ho Choi fight, what was your reaction the first time you watched it?
Well, the first thing you do is kind of, see all your mistakes and go, oh man, I could have done that better. And, that's just the perfectionist in myself. So, you see all that, and then you're able just to kind of enjoy it and go, okay, I remember that. And it all kind of starts coming back to you. It's it's satisfying to rewatch it.
Yeah, it's a fight that I think it's even more of a credit to the both of you that this was a fight that, I mean, it wasn't your main event, but when you watch, there are so many fights every single year. And that to me is one that is going to be remembered for years and years. And it was my fight of the year, and it was the fighter's only fight of the year. I mean, that to me is one that, when Cub Swanson retires, that is going to be one of the hallmarks of your careers, that night in Toronto.
Well, yeah, I think so. And one of the coolest things is that, so many cards, around that were getting so much more hype. And then it was like, oh yeah, in 206. Even there was even talk about fans in Toronto boycotting that fight because GSP wasn't going to be on it, or there was not a lot of Canadians on the card. So, I took that as my opportunity to go out there and just do my part and put on a great performance. And everybody on the card stepped it up. And to me, in my opinion, it was one of the best cards of the year.
I think so. Absolutely. Do you feel that you perform better when you have a bit of a chip on your shoulder going into a fight, which it sounded like you did in that fight with Doo Ho Choi?
Honestly, yeah. I think when I have a chip on my shoulder, I always perform a little better.
Now, afterwards, I mean, people were throwing out all these different options of what would be next for Cub Swanson. Artem Lobov was not one of those options. I think everyone was caught with a curveball when that name was thrown as your opponent. What was your reaction when that was the fight presented to you?
It wasn't like crazy surprising to me because I knew that most of the names people were throwing out, timing wise, wasn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. And it's just the way the game is right now. People, looking for attention, they'll get it. So that's kind of in the era we're in. And, I fought most of the guys in the top 10 already, and they don't really like to do rematches unless it's for a title fight. And, so there's a lot of up and comers that I need to start facing, if I'm not going to be, fighting for a title fight. And this guy was, running his mouth on Twitter and trying to get attention. And they called me, the UFC said, do you want this fight? And I said, is it the best fight I can get? And they said, as of right now, yeah. And I said, cool, got no problem with it.
Do you feel that this is a fight that moves you forward towards getting that title fight that you want? Or is this a fight that it's a great opportunity? You are in a main event. It's definitely a big fight for the UFC to build this card around. What does this fight do for you in your mind?
It's another opportunity for me to showcase my skills and put another win in the belt, I have to go out there and perform. That's all I can do. The rankings, tell us a little bit of the story, but it's not everything. And my job is to go out there and keep winning and keep putting on great performances. And if it's my time to fight for the belt, then so be it. So, beating this person or that person in rankings, it for me, it doesn't matter. I've always kind of stayed in the same place, in the rankings. So, I just got to put together wins and look as good as possible.
Is it at all discouraging to you that you're a guy that's always, just left it to your skills inside of the cage? You're coming off this incredible fight, and this guy who you've stated has gone out and he's talked a lot, and here he is, an unranked guy getting an incredible opportunity. Do you feel, if the roles were reversed, I don't know if you would be getting this opportunity as an unranked guy getting such a high profile fight. Is this at all discouraging to you that this guy is getting such a huge platform with you here?
Oh, not at all. I got to take my hat off to him for, getting an opportunity like this. That obviously what he's doing is working, but for me, that's not my style. It's not something that I would do. I've always thought that I'm not going to break my character for the game. And, I'm going to always try to be who I am. And, cause there's life after fighting and I always want to be myself. So a lot of these guys now that want to try to be something that they're not and play this role. And, it's going to have a couple highs in the sport and they're going to have some bad lows in the sport because, when they get taught a lesson, it's going to hurt extra hard.
I'm also curious, the UFC at the end of the year, they ended up putting their best fights on Fox on Christmas Eve, and it ended up doing incredible. It was like over 4 million people watched this, one of them being your fight with Doo Ho Choi. I'm curious if you were aware this was airing on Christmas Eve, and if you spent Christmas Eve watching your big fight.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I had a big family thing. We went out to dinner, and then we went back to my mom's house, and we were opening gifts, and we turned on television, and it was, my fight was just about to start. I kind of had just forgot about it, but yeah, I knew it was going to be on. We watched it, and it was pretty cool. And I saw all the viewers that had watched it after, and I was pretty proud of that. Like I said, it was a card that had been doubted, and everybody stepped up and performed. It was a great night, and for them to replay it like that just shows that that we all did our jobs that night.
Well, was a fantastic fight, and we're looking forward to this fight coming up on Saturday night. It's coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee, 10 p.m. Eastern time on FS1. Artem Lobov against Cub Swanson. And also, congratulations to you, Cub. I understand you're going to be a father very soon, so congratulations on that news as well.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
Thank you to Cub. It's always great to chat with him. Once again, that is going down this Saturday night in Nashville, Tennessee, 10 Eastern on FS1 TSN up here in Canada. And as I was talking about with Cody, this is a really good card, and we'll quickly give you a preview. The Fight Pass portion will feature the returning Alexis Davis. She will be taking on Cindy Dandois, who's making her debut at 135 pounds. Joe Proctor takes on Brian Barberina, and Hector Sandoval against Matt Schnell. That's a fun little Fight Pass portion for Saturday. Then the FS2 prelims will feature Jessica Penne in her first fight since UFC 199 last June. She takes on Danielle Taylor. Scott Hot Sauce Holtzman takes on Michael McBride. Brandon Moreno, I'm surprised he is as far down this card, considering his last two victories, takes on Dustin Ortiz, which is a very tough fight for him at 125 pounds. And Talis Leites will be taking on Smilin' Sam Alvey. That headlines the prelims, and then main card will be on FS1. Also mentioning for those in Canada, the prelims will air on Fight Network in Canada, so making sure you're covered for all the fights. Main card will kick off with Jake Ellenberger and Mike Perry. Perry is coming off that loss to Alan Jouban, and Ellenberger had that freak loss to Jorge Masvidal with his foot caught between the padding and the cage. It was really he was definitely getting hit by Masvidal, but it was a bit of an unsatisfying finish to that fight. Joe Lozon will be taking on Stevie Ray. John Dodson takes on Eddie Wineland. That could certainly be the best fight on the entire card, possibly. Open St. Preux takes on Marcus Rogerio de Lima. St. Preux is coming off that loss to Volkan Oezdemir, which I don't know if there is one win that has so significantly helped a fighter than that Volkan Oezdemir win that propelled him to be ranked 5th in the light heavyweight division with that win over Oven St. Preux. St. Preux looking to bounce back in that fight. Al Iaquinta returns after 2 years and change away from the sport. He last fought Jorge Masvidal at the beginning of April 2015. He is back, and he takes on Diego the Lionheart Sanchez, who gave one of the greatest interviews. And I use the word interview lightly because this was a filibuster. This was a soliloquy by Diego Sanchez on the MMA Hour this past week with our friend Ariel Helwani, explaining why he is now the Lionheart, which I will say is the completion of a multi-year transaction where Diego Sanchez started using the yes chant, which was borrowed, stolen from Daniel Bryan, who went on to great success with that yes chant, fully inspired by Diego Sanchez. He has given him public credit, and now, all these years later, Diego Sanchez adopting the name that Chris Jericho wrestled as in Mexico as Corazon de Leon. So there you have it. Diego Sanchez getting his just due from the professional wrestling world as the Lionheart. And then we've got Cub Swanson taking on Artem Lobov in your 5-round featherweight main event. I will be going with Cub Swanson in this fight, as we discussed with Cody. Very winnable fight for Artem Lobov. I am not dismissing that. I think you're crazy to look at any of these fights at the top end level and think that it is a foregone conclusion. In fact, I am more reticent than ever when you have a discrepancy like that, where you have such a big gap, because you do wonder if the fighter, I never like to use the term taking someone lightly. I don't think that happens at this level, but there are different gears that you train yourself to hit. And when you are fighting a lesser opponent, that's always there. It's always this tiny cushion you've got, knowing that I should beat this guy even if I'm not 100%. I don't know if that exists in this fight. Artem Lobov winning, believe me, won't stun me, but this is a fight for Cub Swanson. Hey, it's a keep busy fight. And maybe it's part of me. I really wanted to see Cub Swanson and the Korean Zombie. I think that would have been a fantastic television main event that I think would have done a really healthy number on FS1. But for Cub Swanson, hey, this is a payday. And if it's simply keeping busy and you don't get hurt and you can come back quickly, great for him. So I think that's where we look at things here. This is a golden ticket for Artem Lobov. He wins on Saturday. Wow. What will we be saying on Sunday morning about Artem Lobov? He becomes a player at 145 pounds instantly. He is, look at Volkan Oezdemir at 205. I mean, what Artem Lobov could do with one win here over Cub Swanson, it would be a career maker for him. So that is your lineup for Saturday night. And as we mentioned, Bellator is back this Friday, which is kind of a nice showcase of so many of their different talents, mainly prospects. On the undercard, you have Ed Ruth and Tyrell Fortune. I like the pairing of those two. I mean, two guys that Bellator has very, very high hopes for. And then on the main card, AJ McKee, that so many people are high on at 145 pounds. He'll be taking on Dominic Mazzota. Syed Awad takes on Ryan Quinn. Alimale McFarlane will be fighting Jessica Middleton. And then, of course, the main event is your featherweight championship fight. Fourth meeting between Daniel Strauss and Patricio Pitbull Freite. Pitbull has 2 wins over Strauss. The last time they met, it was Strauss getting his arm raised. So if me and Cody are correct and Strauss wins this, we're 2-2. How can you not have a fifth fight between these two? So we will see. That is Friday night. And then, as I said earlier, they get a nice break before the card in England next month, May the 19th in London, which is the Rory McDonald, Paul Daly fight. Michael Page is on that show, Liam McGeary and Linton Vassell. And then you get another month break until the Madison Square Garden show. So I like this spreading out of cards. Even UFC, they're going to enjoy this. After this Saturday, they're off for 2 weeks before the Dallas pay-per-view. I think those gaps are, God, are they needed at times. So that's going to wrap up the show. A big thank you to our guests, Cub Swanson, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and of course, Cody Saftic, who joins me each week. We'll be back next week. We'll chat the fallout of whatever goes on this weekend, and then it's a quiet bit of a stretch. Next weekend, we don't have a Bellator, we don't have a UFC. We will still have much to discuss. That I can assure you. So thanks to all of you for tuning in. You can subscribe to the MMA Report with John Pollock on iTunes. You can follow me at I am John Pollock. Maybe next week we will do a Twitter Q&A because it's been a while since I've done one. Use the hashtag AskPollock, Pollock. Send in your questions over the next week, and maybe we'll even have a prize for the best question. How about that? Use the hashtag so I can find them, and next week we will do a Ask Pollock, and maybe we'll get Cody in on it as well. So that's coming up next week on the MMA Report. Thank you for listening, and have a great weekend.